Hey everyone, this is Eric Keller for ZBrush Jewelry Workshop, and it's time for the September 2022 monthly challenge. Another opportunity to explore some of the tools in ZBrush and see how we can use them in our jewelry design. And so this month we're going to focus on Spotlight, which is kind of a mysterious tool. Maybe you've used it, maybe you don't even know it exists, but in any case, we're going to play around with it, see what happens. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to do a very brief overview and show you a few tools to get you started, get you some inspiration. And then for ZBrush Jewelry Workshop members, I'll have a more lengthy fundamentals video that explores more of Spotlight and explains some of the other functions, because it's a very powerful tool. The reason you might not know about it is it's typically used for texturing, which is, applying photographs to 3D objects to give them, color, which is not something we necessarily do a whole lot of in jewelry design, but there's some other tools that might be kind of useful. But the first thing we need to do is just have ZBrush open and have some kind of object in edit mode on the canvas. So it doesn't matter what the object is, I'm just going to use the polymesh star. So if I go into the texture palette, I'm going to choose a texture by clicking on this button right here. It doesn't matter, I'll just choose this one, which is fine. I just want to demonstrate what's going on here. So I have this selected, and I'm going to go down here and click on Add to Spotlight. So you can see now we have this image of this gallery as taken over our canvas, and we have this weird and wacky interface on top of it. So this weird wacky interface right here, this is Spotlight, and it works like a dial. All these little icons are different functions, and these functions allow you to manipulate the images in different ways and just do crazy things with them. So we're not going to worry about most of these. We're just going to worry about a few of them. Over on this side, we have a lot of functions that allow us to manipulate the current image. You can notice that I have this little circle here in the center, and then we have some lines and a little dot there that's kind of snapped to. So if I drag on this inner circle, you can see I'm moving the interface itself around. You can see every once in a while it's snapping to these dots. So the center dot right here and these other dots. So what it's doing is actually, you can dimly see that ZBrush polymesh star in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this icon, which is the scale icon. Select it so it's highlighted in orange, and I'm going to drag it counterclockwise, and that's just scaling down the image. So we can see now, we can see in the background our polymesh star. So right now we're in image editing mode of Spotlight. So we're not manipulating that 3D star or any other 3D mesh, rather we're working with the images that are kind of overlaid on top. We can drag around the interface by dragging on the center, or you can also see if I click on this handle, I'm actually moving the image itself, right? So then we can use these functions, like I can select this and rotate it and scale and all that kind of stuff. And then we have a bunch of other functions right here, which I'll go into more detail in the fundamentals video. We're going to worry about snapshot, the snapshot 3D, and this sort of image Boolean option. And what snapshot does is it allows us to take the image and convert it into a 3D mesh. But it requires an image that's more like a black and white, very simple profile, as opposed to this photograph of a gallery. So let's see about getting some more images into Spotlight. So I'm going to press the comma button, which opens up Lightbox, and I'm going to go to the Spotlight section, and you can see I have these very simple profiles here. So let's select one of these, this AK hard surface. I'm going to double click on this, and it's going to load that into Spotlight. And so what we end up having, we have all these different profiles here. If I drag right here, you can see that this one is selected. So we can select one of these by clicking on it. And then if I drag right here off center, I can move that over here. So I can drag this over here, I can drag this over here. And then just like I was doing before, I can scale these and rotate and so on. So this is kind of like my library of little profiles here. This right here is just the silhouette of the canvas. So ignore this guy right here. We're just paying attention to these guys down here. These buttons right here allow us to kind of lay these out because sometimes as you're manipulating things and move around, things can get kind of messy. So I can click on this, and that kind of puts them all the same size on the side of the canvas, or I can click on this one, which means the selected one will be up top, and then the other ones will be down here. So you can just see there's different ways to manipulate this. So if I click right here, so none of these are selected, I can actually move all of these guys around. as opposed to clicking on one and moving that around. So I can actually move these all the way off canvas. So let's say I take this one and I move it over here, and then I want to hide these for a second. I'll just move those over there. They're not gone, they're not deleted, they're just temporarily moved over there. And then I could like focus on this guy right here. So I have this selected, I'll move it over here, and I'm going to click on this little camera icon, which is going to make it a 3D object. So click on this, and you can see it's kind of got this object right there. So what I'm going to do is I have perspective on. Let's turn perspective off so we can see a true profile. And I'm going to move this out of the way. And what I want to do is I want to take a look at this 3D profile, but I'm currently in spotlight mode. So if I try and drag over here to rotate the canvas, you can see I'm just moving this around. So how do I get out of spotlight mode? So there's a few hotkeys that you need to learn, and this takes a little bit of practice. But if I press the Z hotkey, that hides the interface. I still see the profile, right? But I can rotate this around, right? And then if I press Z again, it brings back our interface, right? If I press Shift Z, it just turns spotlight off altogether, and now we're back to normal ZBrush like you're used to. So what's interesting about this is, you know, I made this object a profile. If I go down here to the subtool palette, you can see that it's made its own subtool. So we can hide our little polymesh star because we don't really need that anymore. We'll just select this one. And I'm going to press Shift Z. That brings back spotlight, and then I'll press Z to bring back the interface. So let's press Z to hide the interface. Then I can rotate this like this. And then let's press Z again, and I can bring back spotlight. And then I can drag on this and maybe scale it down and do something like this, and then click on this to do snapshot 3D. And I'll press Shift Z just to hide everything. And you can see now I have these two subtools right on top of each other. So already we're kind of making it, sort of fooling around with a 3D object design using these profiles. I'm going to press Z to bring this back and click on, let's say, this button right here. That brings back all our profiles. Well, that's all well and good. So we have some stuff in here that we can play with. So these are just kind of default stuff that comes with ZBrush. Let's take a couple of these. Actually, I'll take this one and this one right here, and let's scale this one up. So I recommend practicing just moving these images around, because at first it feels a little bit strange, just getting used to it. But the other option I wanted to show here is this one right here that looks kind of like a Boolean, right? So I'm going to click on this, and let's see if I can get this to work. This takes a little bit of practice, so let's do something like that. I'm going to click on this icon right here, and that makes a new profile. So I could move that out of the way, and now you see I have a new profile generated by the union of those two images. So let's try that again. I'm going to select this, select this, bring it over here, let's scale it down, and let's, I don't know, click over here. And again, I'm going to click on this, and it's going to make a new profile. You can see where it stops at the border of this other profile. So in other words, if I scale this up and click right here and do a union and then move this out of the way, you can see how it kind of clips on the border of that image. If I want to do a subtraction, let's move this over here. I'm going to, instead of clicking on this union, I'm going to alt click on it. So alt click, and that creates a hole. All right. So you can see how you can manipulate these profiles in kind of interesting ways. So let's make another union right there, and then let's alt click on this, and then we have another hole, and then we could select this and say snapshot 3D, press Shift Z, and we've got a new profile. So it's another way to create a 3D object. And what I love about ZBrush is a lot of these tools that they develop, you know, they're very experimental tools. They're not necessarily like, oh, we're going to create this to fulfill this particular function in a pipeline. That's what a typical 3D software like Maya does. So it identifies a need and then develops a tool specifically for that need. Whereas in ZBrush, they just develop a bunch of stuff, throw it out there and say, play with this, guys, see what happens. And so sometimes that means that the tools are kind of illogical in a way, or not immediately apparent how they might be useful, which can be a little bit frustrating when you're starting out. But at the same time, it opens up really interesting avenues of exploration, and you can do a lot of unexpected things. So that's one of the things I really love about ZBrush. So you're probably asking, what if I want to use my own profiles? What if I want to use something a little bit more elegant than these blocky things like this? Well, you can bring in your own images and turn them into profiles. So let's take a look at how you can do that. So I spent a few minutes in Photoshop just creating a bunch of like profiles. I was kind of going with like sort of a tiki kind of theme, just creating some symbols that I've seen online, just quickly painting them in Photoshop. You could also just grab the images directly online, but what you need is basically a white profile on a black background, 100% black with 100% white on top. So I made a bunch of these things, super simple, and then let's see, I got a little pineapple here. I like the pineapple. And then I just exported these as a bunch of PNGs. So let's go back into ZBrush. Go into Lightbox, Spotlight section. Let's double click on this. So what that does is it just loads this really simple preset with only basically, 4 symbols, just to clear out some of that stuff. And then I'm going to add my own profiles, ones I created in Photoshop, to this set. So I'm going to go into the texture palette and I'm going to choose import. So I'm going to go to my folder. I'll select this stamp, shift select this one so they're all selected, and choose open. And what's kind of nice is if you already have Spotlight active in ZBrush like I did here, and you go to the texture palette and import a bunch of images, it'll automatically load them all into Spotlight. So that saves some button clicking. And you can also, like, if you like this set, you don't want to have to reload it every time, you can go into Spotlight and actually save it out. So if I go into the texture palette and choose Save Spotlight, so I'll save this as, we'll just call it Tiki Stamps, something like that. That means I could just load it up anytime and I can add new images to it and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool. So the next thing I want to do is let's hide these things. And let's take a look at what this looks like as a profile. So I'll go in here and I'll click on that camera icon, Shift Z, and you can see in this cool profile now. So let's take a look at what this. So let's take a look at the topology of this. So I just switched to the white material so you can see this a little bit easier. So you can see it's created polygroups. It's kind of got something sort of similar to a Dynamesh style topology, and it's just extruded, but it's a regular 3D object, a subtool now, so I could go in here and do whatever I want to it, put the gizmo and scale it down and ZBrush, Dynamesh to my heart's content. It's just a great way to create a 3D object. So let's go back to our material. I'm going to press Shift Z to bring back Spotlight, and let's take a look at another one of these. I'm going to press Z to switch back into image manipulation mode. And let's scale up the pineapple. Curious to see what this looks like, and I'll hit snapshot, Shift Z to hide Spotlight, and now I got a little pineapple. So I'm just going to finish out with a quick time lapse, just showing me fooling around. I didn't come up with anything that astounding, but it's kind of a Mr. Potato Head kind of approach to creating a design here, just using these various different profiles along with some simple subtool manipulation tools, mirror and weld and that kind of stuff to kind of create some shapes. So you can see it's kind of a fun approach, and it's very fast, just exploring different ideas, and this kind of creating like a tiki mask kind of deal with some of these symbols. There's also that edge detection option down at the bottom of the Spotlight that you can see how I created that sort of line version, or that outline version. So play with that. I'll leave that as a little secret for you to explore. And there's a few others in Spotlight too that are worth checking out. Of course, half the time you discover these things by accidentally hitting a button, which, that's ZBrush for you. But, using that little Boolean function within Spotlight to create some new shapes, and maybe I like that for the eyes better than what I have down there. And just fooling around. See what you come up with. I hope you have a good time. Enjoy.